Hello guys, this is Paul McWhorter with TopTechBoy.com, and we're here today with episode number 26 in our incredible new tutorial series where you're going to learn Fusion 360 or you're going to die trying. What I'm going to need you to do is pour yourself a nice tall glass of ice cold coffee. That is straight up black coffee, poured over ice, no sugar, no sweeteners, none needed. And as you're pouring your coffee, as always, I want to give a shout out to you guys who are helping me out over at Patreon. It is your support and your encouragement that keeps this great content coming. You guys that are not helping out yet, take a look down in the description. There is a link over to my Patreon account. Think about hopping on over there and hooking a brother up. But enough of this shameless self-promotion. Let's talk about what I am going to teach you today. And what I'm going to teach you is how to install the Creality CR Touch auto leveling system. Now, you remember a couple of weeks ago, I showed you a lesson on how you could compensate for the lack of flatness in your Creality Ender print bed by manually mapping or manually meshing the shape of the print bed. Now, this is going to be almost identical what we're doing now, but instead of having to step across and map it manually point by point by point, when you install this touch sensor, it'll just do it automatically. You can just say find mesh and it'll go cha-ching, cha-ching, cha-ching and step around and get it, saving you time to do more productive things. Now, I will say that I've got a link down below for the exact probe sensor that I'm using. But what I will say, and you guys can get it from the link down in the description. But what I'll say is that if you guys don't have the funds for it, what I showed you 2 weeks ago will yield equally beautiful results. This will not give you better results. This will just give you faster results. And so you guys that are older, that have more money than you have time left in your life, save some of that time by installing this. You guys that have a lot of time left and don't have a lot of money, don't worry. You will be getting equally beautiful prints if you just do what I showed 2 weeks ago. Good enough? Okay. Hopefully you guys ordered your touch sensor already. And what I'm going to do is we got to do two things. I got to show you how to physically install it on the system. And then the second thing I have to do is I have to show you how to install the firmware. The firmware installation is a lot like what we did 2 weeks ago, where I showed you how to put on that Jyers firmware. But 2 weeks ago, what we did was the Jyers firmware that we installed was the firmware for manually mapping the shape of the bed. This will be the same installation process, but it'll just be a different set of firmware, if that makes sense. Okay, so let's see what I need to do here. I need to jump in, and I think I can probably do about the best job possible with this view. And then what I will also need to do is I think I will need to get out of your way. And now what I hope is you can see my hands as I'm working. You're going to need your Allen wrenches that came with your original Creality Ender kit. And then what you're going to need to do is open up your CR Touch. Okay, so when I get mine open like this, okay, what you can see is this is the probe sensor. So we're going to take that out and we're going to put it aside. Okay, I'm going to put that aside. And then what you're going to see over here, there are three different brackets. The good news is you're only going to need one of those brackets. This first behemoth that comes out of the top, this one you don't need for the Creality 3 Ender 2. So that one you're going to take away. And then the L-shaped bracket, let me just see if I can pull this on out. Okay. And then this L-shaped bracket like this, what you'll see is with this L-shaped bracket, the mounting holes here and the mounting holes here are aligned. This simple L-shaped bracket is not the correct one. This more unusually shaped one is it. And what you can see is its mounting holes are offset. And those offset mounting holes are going to fit in your two offset holes that are already machined into your X-axis gantry motion device there. Okay, so this is what we need. And then what we also are going to need is this. And then what we're also going to need to do is dig down in the box a little bit deeper. And what you'll find is you'll find the harness. Let's get that out. Okay, you'll find your wiring harness, set that aside, and you've got some zip ties, set that aside, and then what you have is 4 screws. You have 2 long screws and 2 short screws. So what I need you to do is get in your little box of goodies and get your 2 short screws out. Okay, and I'll get these things opened up. And now what we need to do is, and watch my hands, not my face, but what you need to do is you need to get this aligned properly. And the proper alignment is, first of all, these offset holes, they are for mounting to the gantry over there. And the straight aligned holes are for mounting to the touch sensor. And what you've got to do is you've got to mount it where this little indentation is in this orientation, so it gives you access to that. And then also you see that it is coming down. So I've got the bracket here, and then it's coming down from the bracket, and I am mounting it such that I maintain access to the little cable connector. Okay, so the first thing we need to do now is to get the sensor mounted on this proper bracket. You can see that these 2 holes that are not aligned are going to be what goes over here, and then these 2 holes here that are aligned are going to go to the sensor. Now the tricky thing is, what you have to do is make sure that you put it where the sensor is pointing away from this mounting bracket. So you can see this mounting bracket is coming down and the sensor is pointing up. Now the second thing that you have to do is you have to make sure that this little notch, allows access to this connector. All right, now the other thing is you've got to drop the screw down through, the plastic part, so it'll fall through the plastic part and then drive into the bracket. Now I think it's easier if I come up from the bottom, and so I'm going to put the little screw, and this is the, I need to get the 2 short screws, as a matter of fact. Yeah, I have the 2 short screws. So these are the short screws. And what I will do is I will put the screw on there, and then I will see if I can do this where I am operating blindly, but you can see what I'm doing. We need to come up through this, up through the bottom, and let's see if I can get that to grab. I got it. All right, that one's in. Now I'm not going to tighten it too much. I'm going to kind of leave it a little loose so that I can make it easier for this other one to go in on the other side. Again, we've got it precariously perched up there, and then I will come in and see if I can get it. You know what I spent 4 hours doing this morning? The first time I dropped that screw, it went on the floor, and it took me some number of hours to find it because I have a hardwood floor and the thing did go flying across. So make sure that you don't lose your little screw. Okay, so we're going to come up from the bottom. I'm through the plastic now. Let's see if I can get it onto that. I'm so close to getting that on there. All right, I think I've got it grabbed. Okay, this is probably painful to watch. Now you don't want to tighten this too much because this part here on the sensor is plastic. So if you come in and you just bear down on it, you could crack that piece of plastic. So what I like to do is I like to not use the leveraged end. I like to just use it long way and then come in, and now I'm going to get it where it is tight. Okay, that's tight. Now I'm going to give it, holding it this way, a good like that. And now I'll come over here and give it a good like that. It's snug, but I didn't bear down on it using that levered end. Okay, so I've got that with the 2 short screws. Now let's review. You can see the logo is pointing towards you. The logo is pointing towards you. The bracket is to the left, and then the big part of the bracket is sticking up like that. Does that make sense? And now what we need to do is we need to come in here and see if we can get that on there. I think I'm going to start with this inside one because I think it is the harder one. And so I'm going to come in, and I am this time going to get the long screw. Okay, and so I've got the long screw, and then I said I was going to come to the inside one first, so I'm going to put it on the inside one. Now I'm going to come over here and just sort of hunt for that lower hole, and I think I got that right off the bat. Sometimes it is better to be lucky than good, and so I think I got that in there. All right, and now I'm going to go ahead and get the top one started. Same thing, I'm going to mount it on my tool. It's always hard to know if it's better to try to use the tool, and now I'm in that upper left corner, to use the tool or use your finger to get it started. But these are cramped enough that it's really, I think, better to use that. Now this is going through metal into metal, and so this time I'm really going to more significantly tighten it down. You know, I can apply more force because I'm not worried about cracking the plastic. Okay, there we are, and then I'll come in and boom, like that. Okay, now the really hard part is done. Okay, I think that is the hard part. We now have the touch sensor mounted to the gantry motion device, and now what we have to do is put the little cable on. I'll tell you that you've got 2 choices for doing this cable. Let me see if I can back up a little bit. You can try to thread the cable through this mesh, okay, or you can just kind of wrap it around and go back and connect it to the motherboard. I'm going to do a hybrid solution. I'm going to kind of just wrap it around the smaller mesh, and when you get back here to the larger mesh, I'm going to run it through the larger mesh, and then from that point on up, I'll just kind of wrap it around. One thing is I don't have enough zip ties. They sent, what, 3 zip ties, so I don't think I would have enough to take all the zip ties off and still get the whole thing back together. And so that is what my strategy is going to be. So to go to the next step, we now have to get back to the motherboard. We have to get back to the motherboard. And the motherboard is, let's see if I can back all the way up here. The motherboard is under this. And so what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to take 4 screws off. But before you do that, you need to heat your printer up, you need to retract the filament, and then you need to take the spool of filament off. Then you unplug the printer. You don't get near that motherboard with the printer turned on or with the printer plugged in, because it could be dangerous and you could very easily cause damage to the motherboard. So unload your filament, take that off, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn this over on its left side. We're going to start by taking this top screw off right here, right there, between the barcode and the gantry. You can see that there is a screw there, so we're going to take that off. And I like to drop the screws. Well, I like to drop the screws in the little box so that they'll be handy. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn this over and then try to bring it to a view that you can see. Okay, and I got to get it where you can see it and I can see it. Okay, hopefully you can see it and I can see it at the same time. And so let's see if we can move that out of the way a little bit. So I'm going to come in and I'm going to take this long screw off. Now 3 of the screws are short, but you have to see that this one is long. Okay, put it in the box. Get this one. Put it in the box. And the last one. Now understand that the fan is mounted to this, so you don't want to just jerk it off. You want to kind of pull it off easy, knowing that it is still connected to the fan. Now, what we need to do is we need to look at several things. You need to first of all look and see what your printer version is, okay, your motherboard version. And what you can see is on mine, it right here says Creality, and then what it says is right under that or above it when you're like this, it says version 4.2.2. You've got to see if yours is 4.2.2, or I think the other one might be 4.2.7. Okay, let me see if I can figure out what the other one is real quick here. It's either going to be a 4.2.2 or it's going to be a 4.2.7. You need to make note of that, okay? Now what we're going to do is we're going to get our handy little harness, and then we're going to go to the big end. And the good news is this one is keyed, and because it's keyed, you can see the direction that it needs to go in. And then right up here is the socket for this. And if you have your printer oriented like I do, where it's laying over on the motor, it's laying to the left over on the motor, then that key is going to go down. And so then we're going to come in and we are going to plug it in there. And again, you don't want to put too much force, but you want to get it all the way on. And now what I think I'm going to do is I am actually going to try to run it through. I'm going to try to run it through this larger mesh net, this mesh thing. So I'm going to cut the one. You see, I'm not going to cut the one that goes around only the smaller one. I'm going to cut the one that goes over the big one and the small one like that. And then I've got to cut it one other place over here where it's kind of connected to the base of the printer. I'm going to cut those two. And now I'm going to attempt to feed through, okay? And I think I have to cut this one as well. Okay, so I'm cutting 3, but at least I still have 3 that I can put back. And so what we're going to do is we are going to come, I'm going to come here and I'm going to basically pull this whole mesh thing down where I've got it all bunched up, because when it's bunched up, it's nice and fat. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this small end and I'm going to feed it outside of the small mesh and inside the large mesh. Does that make sense? Because you see there's a small mesh around these wires, but I am going to go outside the small mesh and inside the big mesh. So actually, if you bunch this thing up, it feeds pretty easily. And I'm really almost there. So I'm kind of grabbing it and pulling it. So I'm trying to pull it further in. And then I'm going to hold it and pull it back. And let's see, there it is. So you see I have it here through that. So I'm going to go ahead and feed most of this all through there. This is easier than I thought. Okay, so let's review. We know what our board number is. You might want to jot that down if you're prone to forgetting things. Okay, and I have some tangles in there as well. Let me come over to this view so you can see a little better what I'm doing. I have some tangles in here, so I'm going to try to bring this all the way down and then pull it out so that I sort of pull those tangles out as best I can. Okay, so that looks pretty good. Now what I will do is I will now come and put one zip tie here to bring those back together. That is the wrong way. Okay, so I'll pull that down nice and tight, and then we'll get this clip this excess off. We'll clip this excess off like that. And now I think we will see if we can get that other zip tie on, which there's a little hole over here, and we want to go through that hole. And I think it's easier to go through the hole first. So I'm going to go through the hole. And now I'm going to tuck these back under it. This part is kind of important because it makes sure that the printer doesn't sit on the wires. And I think that is pretty important, that the printer doesn't sit on the wires. So you want to make sure that the wires end up in that little slot. Okay, so we're going to get the wires down in the slot, tighten really down on it. You see down on this corner there's a little hole. So we've got that in there nicely. And now we'll clip off the excess as such. All right, now we're ready to put the case back on. Let's get this down in there nicely. And so we'll put this back on. And what you got to do is you got to kind of keep these wires out of the way. These wires here you got to kind of keep down. And you don't want to mess up with that one. So there, I think I am pretty close. Now let's see if we can get this thing back together again and get those down in the slot. Okay, and like I say, I never know whether it is easier to try to drive it by hand with fingers or to try to precariously balance. Let me see if I can get it through there, and then I will come in and get it lined up. I think I have it. No. Okay, there it is. I have that one started, and so now let's see if we can start the other one. Again, these are short screws that we're using. I think this should be easier. The first one's always the hard one. And then we'll come in and boom, we got that one. I'm not tightening all the way. Now we'll get the long one, which comes over here. You got to kind of feel for that hole. There, I got it. So let's get those down in that slot, and they are in the inside slot, so I can go ahead and tighten this down. That one's tight. This one's tight. That's just sheet metal, so it's sheet metal, so we don't want to really over tighten these. Okay, boom. We got that. We're going to turn it back up now, like this. Let me readjust my camera angle for you. And now we have this one top screw still to put in. And luckily it is there where we were expecting in the box. And if things are lined up right, this should be fairly straightforward. It seems like when they paint things black, it makes it very hard to see the holes. Okay, it has grabbed, and I will tighten it up nice. All right, so that is really great. I'll come back over here. Now, what we need to do is, you can see that we have this. And now what we need to do is I am just going to sort of feed it, and I'm going to wrap it kind of loosely, as I'm going around. And if you want to take a little more time and you have zip ties, you can try to run it inside of this mesh, but I'm not going to do that. I'll probably come back and try to do that later. Okay, now you can see that I have some excess here. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to kind of go up like that. and just try to take out that excess a little bit, you know, make a little bundle there. Now the way this comes in, for what you have to look at is these holes are closer to one end than the other. And in the socket, the pins are closer to this side than the other, which means I need to put it like this. And for me, the blue wire is back towards the gantry and the white wire is towards the outside, and it should just plug in. Okay, and be kind of careful. You don't want to bend those pins, but it is plugging in like that. Blue wire on the inside, and then you got to come straight down with it. And there, I got it. Okay, that is a connector that I do not like at all. Then I've got one zip tie left, and what I will do is now I will come up here and just try to create an appropriately sized loop, and then I'm just going to loop into that. Get the zip tie. Tighten it and clip it like that. Okay, and that doesn't look too bad at all. It would look better if you were inside that mesh, but for me, that looks pretty good. Now I'm going to go ahead and plug the printer back in. And I'm going to turn it on. And at this point, what we're just hoping for is to not see any smoke when this thing turns on. Okay, good news is we didn't see any smoke, and I'm actually seeing a little light there, which makes me happy. Let me try that again. Look at that, and the thing is alive. It's alive. I don't know if you could see that, but the little tip was pointing up, popping up and down. Okay, guys, we have got that part of it done. We've got the basic installation of the sensor done. Now what we have to do is upgrade the firmware. Okay, so we're going to go up and we are going to upgrade the firmware. So what I'm going to need you to do is I am going to need you to go to, and let me see how I can show you that view. I should have that view here somewhere. Okay, so let's come over here and let's download the firmware. So what I need you to do is go to github.com/Jyers, Jyers, /Marlin/releases. Okay, and then I'll put a link down below where you can find this very easily, but you can see there is a plethora of different firmwares that we can install. And first of all, BL Touch, that's for the BL Touch sensor, but it's the same. It's just ours is the CR Touch, but don't worry about that. BL Touch, CR Touch, they're the same. And you can see that we have a lot of different options. Now, BL Touch, that is our sensor. We're good there. Now we have to decide between 3x3, 5x5, 3x3, 10x10, 15x15. What I want to do is I want to do a 5x5. Now, when we were manually doing the mesh, we were doing a 3x3 point probe for 9 points. Because we're doing it automatically now, I'm going to go to a 5x5. So I'm going to want a BL Touch, and then I'm going to want a 5x5, and I'm going to go ahead, because I'm doing more points, I'm going to do the high speed, and what it does is it just moves around quicker. So I'm going to go ahead with that, and then I am going to use the 4.2.2. Why? My motherboard was 4.2.2. If your motherboard was 4.2.7, you would want to use this one. But I'm on 4.2.2 version 2.01. So this is the one that I want to use here. Now these down here were the manual meshes that we did last time. And then also we come down here and there's this universal bed leveling, but that gets to the next level of complexity. So I don't want to really do that. The simplest one that I think I want is the BL Touch 5x5 high speed 4.2.2, and I'm going to click on that. And it has downloaded. So what I'm going to come over, I'm going to turn the printer off. I'm going to get the SD card out, okay, and then I'm going to get wherever my little USB adapter is. I'm going to put that in the USB adapter. I'm going to come over to my computer. I'm going to plug it in. Okay, and now I'm going to format the card. So if I come up and get a viewer here going, hopefully we'll see that thing show up here. Okay, and it has found it and popped up. What I'm going to do is I'm going to right mouse click on this and I am going to format it. All right, what I'm going to do is the FAT32, the kilobit, and then I'm not going to do the quick format, I'm going to do the full format. And this might take a second. And it is complete, so I will say OK, and then I will close this, and then what I will do is I want to drop this file. I need to make my windows right. I'm going to drop this file into my USB drive, this downloaded bin file. So I'll drop it over here. There it is. I'm also going to grab one of my test designs over here in STL files, so we'll have that later when we need it, and I will drop that on there. So that looks good. So what I'm going to do is I will come in and I will eject this this F drive, right mouse click, and I will eject it. Okay, safe. Come back over here, I will get it. Now this is where we're hoping that we will see something boot up. So I'll come over here, I'm putting the SD card back in the printer, and now we're gonna really hope, let's see how I can adjust my view a little bit where you can see. Okay, so now I think that's a pretty good view. We're going to turn it on. Oh, I hope it boots. I hope it boots. I like that this went clickety click. I'm glad that the sensor went clickety click, and it's making us wait. We want to see a happy little something on the screen. Boom, we have it. Okay, really good. All right, so now what do we need to do? So we are ready to auto level the bed. There's a couple of things that you have to do. The first thing is we've got to teach it where the 0 level is. Okay, we've got to teach it where the 0 level is, because it's not going to be using this switch over here anymore. It's going to be using the probe. So it has to learn where the probe tip is compared to where the nozzle is. And this kind of makes sense because my nozzle, I might have tightened it down a little bit more. My nozzle might have been a little shorter. So we've got to let it know where the tip of the nozzle is relative to the tip of the probe. And that is something that really we only need to do one time, and then things will work after that. But let's go ahead and do that. So we're going to come over here to prepare. We go to prepare, and what we're going to do is come down to homing, and then under homing, what we are going to want to do is home the Z-axis. Now, what's it going to do under the home the Z-axis? It is going to try to find where that Z-axis is. It's going to try to find with the probe where the probe touches the bed. And so if I were to touch the sensor right now, it would stop. I'm not going to do that. But what we're going to do is we're going to let it go and have the probe find the bed. And it is coming down, and it has found the bed. And now the probe knows where the bed is. That is good. But now what we need to do is we need to go back, and now we have to set the Z offset. And it's setting the Z offset where we let it know where the tip is just almost touching, the bed. And so we're going to set the Z offset. We are going to do a live adjustment. Okay, now it's gone down, and now I need to look under it visually. Okay, this is not the sliding paper thing. And you can see I did this earlier and I had it set here, but let's just go back to 0 where yours would have been, and make sure that you have the live adjustment set to yes clicked. And then for me, my zero position looks like it's a little bit too high. Now what I want you to do is come down gently, because you want to get it just where it's almost touching. So I'm going to come and I'm going to go -1. Like that. Okay, that is not enough. Your numbers are going to be different. Understand that. And so now I'm going to go to -1.5. And I want it where it's just touching. So I think I'm going to go on down to -1.6. Okay, and now for me, that looks like it is just kissing the build plate. Okay, so that's going to be good. I've got that set. Now I'm going to go back, and what I'm going to do is a manual level. All right, so we'll start. You do not want to use the probe here, right? This is a manual level. So what we're going to do is go to the bottom left, and then I need to that looks I need to, guys, I got gunk on the head, so I'm going to go back and I'm going to disable the stepper, and I'm going to bring it up and get the head clean, because remember, this is a manual alignment, and for this step you don't want any gunk on the nozzle. So let's see if I can come in here and get that off. That looks good. So now what we will do is we will come back, we'll go back, and now this time we just need to go to the manual leveling. And now we're going to go back to the old paper technique. Now it's going to find where it thinks the zero position is. It's going to find where it thinks the table is. We've already set the Z offset, so we don't need to do that again. But now it knows where the print bed is. Okay, now I'm going to go to the bottom left. Okay, and I'm going to dial that in. Top left. That looks good. Top right. And then bottom right. Okay, that feels good. Now you might ask, why are you having to do a manual bed leveling? Because the purpose of the CR Touch is not to compensate for a crooked bed or a tilted bed. It's to compensate for the shape of the bed. So that step that we just did is still needed. So we've got that done. So we're going to go back And now we're going to go back and we are going to come down. We are going to come down to the level. Okay. And now we're going to create a mesh. Now it should go around and it should map the shape of the bed. The bed's level, it is going to find what the shape of the bed is. And guys, the real trick here is getting your Z-axis offset right. You've got to get your Z-axis offset right, because all the system knows is where the probe tip is. And the extruder nozzle is going to be different depending on your nozzle and depending on how you put it in there. All right, and so we've got to get that Z off so those two things are together. Now you can see that it's going across, and we set it for a 5x5, so it'll take a couple of minutes for it to level, for it to do the mesh. Now while that's going on and doing that, let's go ahead and let's go over to Fusion 360 and let's create a device that we can print, a very aggressive device. The hardest thing to print is something that consumes most of the build plate. And so you can see what I did here was I just created a square, and I'm going to edit it so you can see it, and that is 170 by 170, and then I finished the sketch, and then as I finished the sketch, what I did was I came out and I extruded it by 1 millimeter. Then what you do is you export that as an STL file. Okay, so I would export it. I've already exported it, and so now I'm going to come in and I'm going to fire up Cura. Now, in order to use the mesh that you have created, you have to change the G code of Cura, the G code that Cura sends. And the way we do that is we come up here to Creality Ender 3, that's right, and then we come down to Manage Printers. We want to manage the Creality Ender 3. We're going to manage the settings. Now you should see on yours, and I wish I could make this bigger, but you should see a line that says G28. You need to add a line after G28, which is M as in Mary 420, a space, S as in Sam 1. So M420 space S1 space Z10. Okay, now you have modified your machine settings, so that's very good. Now you are ready to bring in that exported STL file, and so I will back up here. I've got to navigate over to it. Okay, and here it is, and I'll come and I'll drop it on here. All right. You see that it almost fills up the build plate, but I did, making it 170 by 170. I left enough room to put the skirt on. So now what I'm going to do is I'm using dynamic quality, and I'm going to go ahead and slice it. And then we'll come back there. Let's go back and check on our printer. You can see that it was doing a 5x5, and so it took a little time to do that. But now it has probed all 25 locations. It's asking me to confirm. And now it is saving it to the EEPROM. Okay, so we have got that saved in there. So what we can do is we can turn the printer off. We can take the SD card out. Never fear, those settings were saved to the EEPROM. And so now it's in the USB. I'll come over here and plug that in. And hopefully down in the lower right, I will see the option of save to the card. It might take a second to do that. Okay, it's not seeing it right off the bat, so let me just come back over and let's see if I can slice that again. Okay, it's I'm sorry, let me go back to the view where you can see. Okay, so what I've done is I put the SD card in, and then we had sliced it, and so now in the lower right behind me, right there, we're going to save to the removable disk. It has been saved, so we'll eject it. Now that it is ejected, we will come back and put it in the printer. Okay, get it here, and now we have a test file on here, and we have a mesh in here, and with that additional line of G code that we put on the manage printer settings, what that does is it tells it to use the save mesh. Okay, so now I'll come back to this view, and now we are ready to not need to do anything except print. And I will print that thing that I just exported. Okay, so now we're just waiting for it to heat up. I'm going to look and see. Yeah, the head still looks nice and clean. The extruder nozzle, I mean. Our bed's at 42, almost up to speed. But guys, I can't tell you how important it is to get that Z-axis offset in sync with the position of the probe tip. And therefore, you don't necessarily have to do that every time, but you really need to get that Z-axis offset synced in. And I think I've got mine just tuned to perfection. But if it's not tuned to perfection, we can still come in and do a tune. But if this is working the way I want it to, I shouldn't have to do a tune. Okay, our bed is up to temperature, and now our print head is coming up to temperature. The hot end is coming up to temperature. So the kind of thing that people are surprised about with these auto bed levelers is you think that you would never have to fool with the knobs again. But like I was saying, you've got to get the knobs in the right place manually, and then after you have that, then the auto bed leveler will take care of these types of warped beds. And I know that some people try to do it without that, but really you're taking shortcuts when you do that, and when you do that, then you're trying to compensate for a misleveled bed using the software, using the probe and the software, and it's really not designed to do that. And so I think probably the people selling these things are just exaggerating a little bit, like you would never have to fool with it at all. But what is true is you'll get better results because you have this mesh. Now, really, you can get very good results doing the manual mesh determination that I showed you a couple of lessons ago. But then with that, the issue is you're only probing 9 instead of probing 25. We're getting a much cleaner profile of the shape of our bed, and then it does automate one part of it. We are at 198, so I hope to see some motion and some action here very quickly. We're at 200, and it looks like it's coming to life. It's going to come over and do the smear. And guys, make sure that your cords are not coming down on your print as you're doing this, because when you print to the edge, you're kind of in danger of that cord hitting, your cables hitting. Now it's finding the position of the bed as we expect. So it knows where it is now, it's good. And now it's going to come over and do the smear, and then it should do the skirt. Okay, that is kind of globbing up. Hopefully that glob on there will peel off. I'm going to try to help it a little bit come off. It's still on there. There it came off. And I'm going to clip this. I'm going to clip that little glob off because it is just going to generate problems for us. Got a little debris here I will get off. Okay, it's making the skirt, and the skirt is looking very good to me. That skirt is looking very good. And the nozzle is looking pretty clean. So I'm not sure this time why I ended up with a glob there. That is just something that happens sometime. But it's making the second level and it's looking very, very clean. Now you notice I'm not going in and tweaking the Z-axis offset right now. I'm just going to see how well will this do. How well will this do just completely on its own. I'm going to go ahead and take this off. That is looking clean. It's making clean corners. It's a nice smeared out layer. Now, if you have a problem at this point, very likely you didn't get that Z-axis set right, that Z-axis offset. And so that is something that you might need to go back and do again if this isn't working. But mine is looking most beautiful. And I think very soon we should hop over and we should start making the actual square. Looks good. Let's see if we got that corner. The corner looks good. And we'll let it run a little while, and then maybe what we'll do is we'll go ahead and look at it under the scope. So I'll get the little microscope out, and I will get that ready to go. I am sorry this is such a long lesson, but I really did not want to make this 2 or 3 lessons because I wanted all the information in one place. And as I was trying to learn how to do this, the problem that I was running into, they would do one video on the installation of the firmware, then they would do one video on the installation of the touch sensor, and then they would say this or that, and then I would end up without one clean picture of how to do it. And so even though this video is long, it is one clean picture, and that first level is looking absolutely gorgeous. And do you see how we're going all the way across the printer and it is still looking really good? I'm excited now to see it go on its diagonals. That is a beautiful first layer. And probably what I'll do is we'll watch the first few diagonals and then I'll probably pause the video and then we'll take this thing off when it's done and we'll see what it looks like. So again, this has been a long lesson, but I wanted all the information for you in one spot. Okay, it's starting with the diagonals. So what do you need to do every time? You really need to do the manual bed leveling every time, or you need to come in and you need to do the home. Okay, after you do the home, you need to set the Z offset. And I really think that as you do the Z offset, you need to bring that tip to where it is just kissing the build plate, and then it knows exactly where the nozzle is relative to the build plate. And so what are we going to do every time? We're going to home the Z-axis, and then we're going to set the Z offset, and then we are going to manually align the manually level the bed using the bed assist where it moves it to the 4 positions for you. Then we are going to auto mesh. We're going to create the auto mesh, and then we're going to be ready to print. But I really do like to do that every time, and that first level is looking really good. I'm looking at it and I would say that if there's anything, I'm not going to do the manual Z-axis align. I'm not going to go in and tune it here. If I looked at it, I am just ever so much, ever skosh of a little bit close to the build plate because I see a few little filaments popping up, but it really is very, very good. And I would rather be a little bit too close than a little bit too far away. So let's let this run for a while and I will be right back. And we're back and we are just almost done. And what we see here is a most beautiful, most uniform, most stickiest to the build plate first layer that perhaps I have ever seen. And I don't know if you guys know how hard it is to build something across the whole build plate. That is something that's like the hardest thing that you can do, is to try to get something that sticks and is consuming the entire build plate. And it looks like we have been able to do that. We are almost done, and then we'll take a closer look at that first level after this thing finishes up in the next few moments, and boom, we are done. And what I can see is it's an absolutely beautiful. I'm going to go ahead and stop it. Okay. Why am I stopping? I'm stopping because we made it 1 millimeter thick, and all we really care about is that first level. And so let's pull this out so we can see it. Hopefully, I'm going to have to disable the old stepper motors. Okay, there we go. And we pull it out. And what we can see is it uniformly adhered all the way across the build plate, didn't peel up on the edges, and just absolutely beautiful print. Now, as I look at this, I see a couple of areas like here and here and here that I'm getting a little bit of wisps forming. And what that's indicating is that we were a little bit too close to the build plate. So if I were to tweak my printer, what I would do is, remember, for me, the Z-axis offset was at -1.6. I think maybe backing that off to let's see, what was it? I better not just wing that. Yeah, I had it at -1.6. If I were to do it again, I would do it at -1.5. Okay, I would do it at -1.5, because when I look at this, it is just a little bit, just a skosh too close, and I'm getting a little bit of over extrusion there in a few spots. But as I was watching this thing print, I thought through it a little bit more, and really every time you don't have to set the Z-axis offset. The Z-axis offset is to calibrate from the difference between the position of the probe when the probe is hitting the build plate and triggering, and when the actual nozzle does. And that isn't going to change if we take the build plate off and put the build plate back on. When we do all of those types of things, it doesn't matter, because the probe finds the face of the build plate, okay? And all it needs to know is how to normalize for the variation in the position of the extruder. So how often do we need to go in and do that homing and Z-axis offset step? Only when we change the nozzle, because when we change the nozzle, we might get it tighter, we might get it looser, it might be up and down a little bit. But once you dial in that Z-axis offset, then what do you have to do on every print? You go to the manual level, okay, and it steps across, and you adjust it with the knobs, and then after that, then you do the auto, what is it called? Let's make sure that we're saying this right. You do, under level, you do the create new mesh, and then it will go in and it will create the mesh for you automatically. So we greatly simplify things. So what am I going to do on every print? I'm going to take the bed and I'm going to wash it, and then I'm going to bring it in, and then I am going to manually level it using the level assist feature here. And then after that, I'm going to go right in and do the create new mesh. All right, man, guys, look at this. I'm wondering if I can peel this off yet. I'm eager to be able to look at it. I can get the skirt off, and let's see if I can get the old fingernail under here. Wow, that is really That is really adhered very well, and you can see that it is an absolutely beautiful first layer. Let's come in under the scope and see what it looks like. And what you can see is it is very, very nice looking. And what I can see is that I was a little tiny bit too close. So if I'm going to be a perfectionist, you can see that this was where I was printing, and then I was over extruding on these ridges. So I was just ever slightly too close to the build plate, but instead of the minus 1.6, instead of the minus 1.6 Z offset, I would go up a little bit to minus 1.5. Now your numbers are going to be, different, but what you need to see is that if you're getting just a little bit of this over extrusion, let's see if I can find some of those little wispy filaments. There's not very many on here, but let's see if I can find something here within the field of view. You see I have a little bit of these defects, a few little defects like that. Those little whiskers are sort of indicating that I was a little bit too close to build plate. So what I would do is I can just do this, I could do that right now. What I could do is I could just go in and change it from minus 1.6 to minus 1.5. And then next time things should be perfect. And next time, what do I need to do? I just need to manually level it with the knobs and the piece of paper, and then after manually leveling it with the knobs and the piece of paper, then I would go in and I would do the create new mesh, and then I would be ready to print. Wow, guys, this was a long lesson. This is probably one of the longest lessons I ever did, but darn it, I wanted to have in one place how to go from installing the sensor, manually getting the sensor hooked up, to installing the firmware, to getting the level, and going through a print. I wanted that in one place, and so I hope you'll forgive me for this long video. I will try not to make it that long in the future, but you should have the tools that you need now to get a perfect print every time, and it should happen quicker because we're not having to manually determine that bed mesh like we did 2 lessons ago. And then also you are not having to every time go in and set that Z-axis offset. Also, because we are probing 25 points, we're going to get a better contour on the shape of our bed than when we were doing it by hand and only doing 9. So I think with that, if you have the funds, it's really worth getting this CR Touch sensor and go auto, because you can probe more places, you can get a better contour. If you can't afford it, just go back 2 lessons ago and do what I was showing you, how you can do the 9-point mesh manually. Man, guys, I hope you're having as much fun taking these lessons as I am making them. I'm eager to get this video over because I want to go do some prints and play with this thing. If you enjoyed the video, give us a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed already, subscribe to the channel. When you do, ring that bell so you'll get notifications of my future lessons, and share this with other people, because the world needs more people 3D printing and fewer people sitting around watching silly cat videos. Paul McWhorter with TopTechBoy.com. I will talk to you guys later.